The purpose of this video is to give you a quick review of converting base 10 RGB red, green, blue color codes into the base 16 hexadecimal codes. And then vice versa, we'll go backwards from base 16 to base 10. And then also talk about how to decide based on a color code what color are we talking about. Alright, so to start out with, if you're given a red, green, blue color code, then this is in base 10, or we would say that this is a decimal number, and we need to convert to base 16. Alright, so here's the process. Quick review. 155, we need to determine how many groups of 16 and 256, etc. that we would have. These will all be 2-digit hexadecimal numbers, so we actually just have a very short division problem. Alright, so divide each one by 16. And 155 divided by 16 is 9, remainder 11. Alright, and then you can see your very next number will always be less than 16, so you're just about done. 16 goes into 9 0 times, and that 9 is still a remainder. Alright, and then we just need to remember to write these. If the digit happens to be greater than 9, then we need to write that using a letter in hexadecimal. Right, so this would turn into 9, and then B stands for 11. Alright, so we're doing these one at a time, so moving on to the next one, 23. Okay, 16 goes into 23 one time, and that gives you a remainder of 7. And then 16 goes into 1 0 times, remainder 1. Alright, so this is the hexadecimal number 17. Okay, and then finally 248. 16 goes into 248 15 times with a remainder of 8. 16 goes into 15 0 times, remainder 15. And then 15 gets represented by an F in hexadecimal, and 8 would just be an 8. Okay, and then finally we would just string all of these together as a 6-digit hex code. So we would write this as # 9B17F8. And that's it. Alright, and then going the other direction. Alright, so if you have a hexadecimal number, then the # kind of indicates that these are the color codes. So this is your clue that this is not a 6-digit number, but rather that this is 3 different 2-digit numbers. Alright, so then what we're really looking at is groups of 1 and groups of 16 in each of these numbers. Alright, so we would have A groups of 16 and F groups of 1. Alright, and then we need to remember that A stands for 10, so this is 10 groups of 16, and F is 15, so we've got 15 groups of 1. So this is 160 plus 15, or 175. Alright, 78, or I should read that 78, would be 7 groups of 16 and 8 ones. Alright, and that is 112 plus 8, which is 120. And then finally, 06, I can go through this process, but you may also want to just take a shortcut and realize that anything that's less than 16, so the numbers 0 through 15, would just be, exactly what they are. So anything that's, 06 is just going to be 6 in base 10 as well. 15, you won't actually see the 15. You're going to see 0F, right, and that would be 15. So if you actually see 15, that may not actually mean 15. Alright, so in this case we've got 0 groups of 16 and 6 ones, and that's 6 as we expected. Right, and then if we wanted to write this as a color code, I would just use a parentheses and have 3 different numbers here, 175, 120, and 6, and that indicates that I've got various amounts of red, green, and blue. Alright, I'm going to erase that one and do the other one for you. Just clear the screen off. Okay, and then the number 1300FF, right? So again, we'll split this up into three two-digit numbers. And remember, 13 doesn't actually mean 13. This is a 1-3, meaning a group of 16 and 3 ones. So this is actually 19 in base 10. 0, 0, that's an easy one. 0 groups of 16, 0 ones is just 0. Right, and then FF, you may have this one memorized by now. This is F groups of 16 and F ones, which is 15 groups of 16 and 15 ones, and that would be 255. And that's your greatest two-digit number in hexadecimal. So this one would be 19, 0, 255 to represent the amounts of red, green, and blue. Alright, so keep in mind that the range for each colors in base 10, we talked about these running from 0 to 255. So in hexadecimal, the amounts of each color that you could have would be from 00 to FF. Those will be the codes that you'll see. So the more of a color we have, the closer to FF it will be, right, or even to 255. And then the less of each color we have, the closer it will be to 0. So this helps when you're trying to decide what the color actually is that this code represents, and we're going to base it on this color wheel and also the amounts of each color that we have. So if I see the code 002222, right, this indicates 0 amount of red, and then a very small amount, since we're close to 0, of green and blue. And notice you don't actually have to convert this to decimal to know that, if you remember that we're just going from 00 to FF. Alright, so on the color wheel, if I have no red, then I'm not in that circle at all. And then I've got equal amounts of green and blue. So I'm in this intersection, and this would be a shade of cyan. And the closer to 0 we get, the less of those colors we have. And you may recall that that if you have none of any of these three colors, right, no light at all, that's black. So the less cyan that you have, the closer to black that this is. So this is a very dark shade of cyan. And if you wanted to test that out, recall that in the 4-point or your PowerPoint for this section, there's a link to the W3 schools webpage, and you can enter in these codes and check and see what that color is. Alright, similarly for 00AAAA, I have equal amounts of green and blue, so it's a shade of cyan, and we're almost up to FF. We're not too far away from there, so this is a very light shade of cyan. Alright, or you could say like a vibrant shade. Alright. Alright, 00 FFFF. Alright, so try this one. You could use that link to see this one. But this is no red, and then the maximum amounts of green and blue. So this is basically a pure cyan. Alright. How about 0066EE? Okay, so still no red. And then we do have some green and some blue, but this time it's a little more of the blue than the green, because EE is a higher value than 66. So this would be, you could still say that this one is cyan, but maybe we would say that this is like a bluish cyan, a little heavy on the blue. Oops. And if you actually type the code into that link, you'll see it actually doesn't even really look cyan, depending on your screen or your monitor, but this really does look more like a blue color. And vice versa, if we had no red, quite a bit of green, and then not quite as much blue, we could still say that this is a cyan color. That would be okay for your test, but we also, you might notice that this is a little more on the green side because we have more of the green. Okay, so that's really all you need to do for determining the color values, just to make your decision based on if there is none of the color at all, right? So no red in these examples. If we had no green, then you'd be looking at something that was a combination of red and blue. Right? So that could be maybe a red, maybe a blue, maybe a magenta, somewhere in the middle there. And then there's some flexibility. So for these last three codes here, if you had said cyan of any sort, then that would be good. If you wanted to specify a little more what the color is, then maybe a bluish or greenish is also good. You could also talk about darkness or lightness. If it's closer to a large amount of color, that's closer to the middle, to white. And then if it's closer to no light, or a very small amount, then that's closer to black. All right, and then we can do the same thing if you had the red, green, and blue value. Same thing, except this time now your range of values run from 0 to 255. Right, so this would be a color which has quite a bit of red, no green, and then quite a bit of blue. So we've got equal amounts of red and blue, and that seems to indicate that this is a magenta color. We've got quite a bit of them, so it's a fairly vibrant shade of magenta. The less of those values we would have would be closer to black. All right, so this is basically magenta is a good answer. Okay, or light magenta, true magenta, anything like that would be fine. All right, and then finally, if you had, let's do 12, 0, 12. Same thing, equal amounts of red and blue, but this time we have very little of those colors, so this is actually going to be a very dark, same thing, dark magenta. All right, but you're okay for your test as long as you say some sort of magenta. And I will give you this color wheel chart to decide.